Welcome, everyone, to Everything is Attitude, another episode of Everything is Attitude. I am actually thrilled today to have, I'm always thrilled to have our guest, but I'm thrilled today to have a good friend of mine, Dr. Joseph Rella. And I'm also thrilled, as always, to have Rosemary with me. Hello, Rosemary.
Well, good, good. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Rosemary.
I was laughing because just those few moments before we go live, we're all sitting there waiting to go
Yes,
live.
the
We've got these
ultimate.
we've got these smiles on our faces that if it takes a while, we tend to freeze. So if we, when you first come, when you first tune in and you see us sort of having these weird, starey smiles, that's the reason why. So I'm here with Al as usual, we're also here with Joe. And I have to tell everyone that I have met Joe just one time, right, Joe?
Yes, that's right, Rosemary.
But I know a great deal about you because in that one time, we did make the most of that one time.
You absolutely did.
Al, Joe, you and Al have a very special relationship, I think. So
Yes.
I'm really going to hand over to you, Al, to sort of start the thing, go backwards and forwards, and I'll just come in when I feel that I need to interfere. Does that sound fair?
That sounds fine.
Great.
Okay.
So, so I'll keep referring to him as Doc. That's just what I call him. But
Oh,
so,
that's fine. That's
so
not,
if
and
anyone
I'll call
hears me
you
say
Joe.
that, that's just kind of how I refer to him. We talked yesterday a little bit, Doc, right, about some of the things you were going to talk about, and if we could start out with sort of your journey these past couple of years. I guess first what you do, who you are, introduce yourself, and sort of your journey and what you're going through in life now. And then we're going to touch a little bit about still some of the paramount things that you have a challenge with still in your life too, amongst many things that you're going through right now. But if you could just sort of let everybody know who you are and explain a little bit about your journey these past couple of years, that would be awesome.
Okay. I am a school superintendent in Comsaug. You're not going to remember Comsaug, so let's say Port Jefferson Station, New York. I've been in education for 35 years, and in private business for about 10, 11 years. In between two bouts of teaching and coming out here to the island. I
So
I
this is Long
Long
Island.
Island, right in New
So
York.
just to clarify that in
Right.
New
I'm
York.
sorry.
That's all
I'm
right.
very, I guess, parochial. When I say the island, I figure everybody knows what I'm talking about. But yeah, I love what I do, and the last few years, as you mentioned, have been challenging. Um, uh, every life was going along swimmingly, and really it started about 3 years ago when my wife of 42 years at the time, 41 years at the time, contracted breast cancer, and that was a real shock to both of us. And she received treatment and was really cancer free when she suddenly passed away in August of 2016. And that was, there's a low point in my life. That was the moment. And I felt like I had been, I was concussed, hit in the side of the head. And I had lost my North Star, that constant in somebody's life. And I have four sons, and I have seven grandchildren, five granddaughters. Um, and I learned from Rosemary that there was a miscarriage that Jackie had early in our marriage, and that's a girl named Emily. And I learned about her the time Rosemary and I sat together, and I'm happy about that, obviously. Um, and because I really don't know what to do with girls. I have five granddaughters. I'm one of three brothers, and I had four sons. And Becky was the only girl, female, that I really, besides my mother and my grandmother, who I was in constant contact with. And I thought she was just a guy that was weird, and I was going to fix that. Obviously, that didn't happen, and I'm learning every day about the female mind and how they plug into the world.
Well, you've got all those grandchildren, so
Oh
you
yeah,
have to, don't you? You've got
They-
to. You've got to.
they
So,
remind me.
so as I'm listening to the story, I have heard it before, but it's a while ago. But as I'm listening to the story, my understanding is that you had a wonderful wife, a wonderful life,
Yep.
wonderful children.
Yep.
I'm sure work-wise there was stress and all the rest
Yeah,
of
but,
it.
you know,
But
even with family,
basically,
it wasn't perfect, but
right.
it
But
was
basically,
wonderful.
you had a really wonderful life, and your wife, as you've said, and the wonderful sentiment, you said she was your North Star.
Correct.
And I think, you come across, I'm sure you come across to people listening now, but you come across as a person who has a great attitude about life and about things, and a great attitude. You've got 4 sons, so you're a father, and I know this is something I do know, that you were a great father, and you have 4 sons who absolutely think you're, in English terms, the bee's knees. You are the bee's knees. You are. That means that you're something really special to them.
Yeah.
Would you say so? We've sort of got that
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
there.
I'm very fortunate, you know.
Right. But then all of a sudden, your wife gets this illness. Then she seems to be doing really, really well. And
Right.
then all of a sudden, crash,
Correct.
with no warning at all.
None.
She's gone.
Yep.
Within what, the space of a day or 2 days?
No, it was instant. I was working upstairs painting a room and wallpapering, and it was a hot August day. She came upstairs and said, "Can I bring you something? You want some ice water? You want?" I said, "I'm going to be done in about an hour. I'll clean up and we'll figure out what we're going to do for the rest of the day." And I went downstairs and she was on the floor dead. I called 911 and they couldn't revive her.
And that has got to be, especially after 41, 42 years, whatever, that has got to be such a tremendous, tremendous shock to you.
It was.
And do you think that shock is still with you in some regards?
In some ways, it will never leave.
Yeah.
But in other ways, it has receded,
Right.
and it's been replaced by wonderful memories of Jackie. And I'm reminded of her constantly in the faces of my grandchildren, my children.
Yeah.
And I believe my youngest one is almost just about 3 years old, and she's come out with phrases and words that we never used, but Jackie used.
Yeah. So you think, which I'm, you know what I believe. So I'm prone to believe too that your wife Jackie is influencing her in some way, or somehow there's a connection between this little girl and your wife. So that must be wonderful for you too. So
It is.
so sort of getting to the point of this show a little bit.
Okay.
Tell me, Al, if you think I'm rushing ahead here.
Rosemary, I do want him to talk about the piece that he is going through now as well. We could do that after.
No, let's do it now.
So just, Doc, if you could just continue with
Okay.
back to what you're talking about. Continue with sort of after that happened.
So about a year later,
yeah,
when the dust was starting to settle a bit, and I was in a better place certainly than I was at the time of her passing. I was diagnosed with stage 4 bile duct cancer. I have a tumor in the right lobe of my liver, and it's not operable. And so I went online, which was a mistake, and I had about 5 minutes to live as far as I could tell. I was with one of my sons at the house, and he said, "I'm going to go down and get coffee, Dad. You want a cup?" And I said, "Sure." And I wanted to say, "You better hurry back. I don't know if I'm going to be here when you get here." And when Jackie first learned, I was sitting with her when she learned that she had breast cancer, and I said to what went through my head, later on that day was, I wonder how I would respond if I was told something like that. And well, now here it was. And for about 3 days, I was really in terror. I didn't sleep. It was on my mind constantly. I hadn't seen anybody yet. I just had been diagnosed. I was scheduled to see an oncologist on day 4 of, first I was told about it, and then I had to go see an oncologist. And I went. But for those 3 days, what was really worrying me was, how am I going to, are my children going to be doing when I'm not here? And financially was the first way I thought about it. And once I kind of got my act together and started to plan, that went away. And then prior to this, it could have been at this time. I have it written down. I didn't look at it before I came tonight, but Jackie came to me, and I was not sleeping. I was awake, kind of that twilight state, and I was.
I know.
I'm sure you do. But she came to me and she said, "Don't be worried." And I said, "Okay." She said, I'll be here waiting for you." And I said, "All right." And then she showed me, all of a sudden I was standing next to her, side by side. We were looking down this way, and out there were my feet, and up this end was my head in a hospital bed, in a hospital room. And my children and grandchildren were around the bed. And she said, "What's going to happen is you're going to turn to me, and I'm going to hug you." And she gave me one of her famous Jackie hugs. And at that point, I saw my hand drop in front of me in the bed, and the children were crying a bit and hugging each other. And she said, "And that's it." And I said, "Okay."
Wow.
And that really stayed. It's with me all the time. She told me that
How
I
wonderful
believed her.
it is.
Yeah, and at that point, there was a great sense of calm and peace. I tried to recreate it, thinking I imagined it, and I could not recreate it. I could not get that picture to come back that way. And it was different than a normal dream, because usually in normal dreams, you can't control the dialogue and you can't answer. Something, your voice is talking, you see yourself sometimes, but you're not in control. And I was in control. It was like I was thinking and I knew I was thinking. It wasn't, I was some other.
So it was real.
Yes. And pretty much after that, I went to see the oncologist, and he said, "It's treatable. We're going to start with chemotherapy." I went to Sloan Kettering, which has a center
Right.
about a half an hour from me. I don't have to go all the way into New York City, which would be about a 2.5 hour one-way commute, maybe, if you didn't hit traffic. And the oncologist there met with me and said, we can't really operate on it because it got into it got into the lymph system. So we could take out the tumor, but it would inevitably pop up someplace else. And we don't want to do that. And they have 100 years of research backing them up. And I said, "Great," so she said that the plan will be to contain it, to shrink it. Now, I started chemotherapy last October 17th, so I'm coming up on 1 year of this. WebMD was wrong, by the way. I did have more than 5 minutes to live. And I have, it has not grown and it has not spread. The tumor has actually shrunk slightly.
And
So
how
now-
are you feeling in
I
yourself?
feel, if I didn't know I had cancer, I would not know I had it. I have the only symptom I get is some fatigue after the chemo.
Okay.
And then I just have to, hydrate a lot and get to bed earlier.
Doc, could you tell the piece about what your oncologist said to you, specifically about how you're handling it and how it affects everything about your health that you told me the other day?
Well, the last time it was really the last about a month ago. They cut the chemo drugs in half that I'm taking. They put me on maintenance now. So I still go the same number of times per month, which is basically 2 Fridays in a row, 3rd Friday off. That's the cycle, 3 weeks. But she said, I said, "Nice work, Doc." And she said, "It's not me." She said, "It's you." And I said, "Well, look, if this thing was going sour, I'd be talking to you. So if you're going to take the hit, you have to take the credit too." She says, "No, she says, I will." She said, "But please understand," she said, the way you've handled this from the beginning, I don't see this. And I said, well, you got a tough job. You're always telling people they're going to die. And she said, I know. She said, but I don't see the response. Every time I go, they give me a piece of paper, and there's about 1,000 possible symptoms for every part of your body. And they say, any new symptoms, or, what are you feeling? They want to know. And on the flip side, there's a thermometer, 0 to 10, and it says distress level. And since I've gotten there, I've circled 0. So she says, it's interesting that you keep circling 0 on. I said, well, you're asking the wrong question. If you put happiness level, then I might be at a 4 or 5 on a particular day, but I'm not feeling distress. I can't control this. There's nothing about, the only thing I control is my response. And I saw a great movie with my grandchildren, and one character says to the other in it, when you worry, you suffer twice. And that stuck in my head. And it really did.
It's so true.
So it's a win-win. If the longer I live here, that's great, because I'm going to retire next August. And I live with my oldest son. He bought a house, our house, actually, right in Port Jeff Station. And I love where I'm living. It's right in the school district where I work. And my grandson is now in 5th grade in one of our elementary schools. And my granddaughter, who's 2.5, and they're not ready for her. They'll have a couple of years to prepare for her. She'll be going into kindergarten. And my plan for retirement is to be a full-time pop-up. I want to spend as much time as I can with them and be involved as much as I can with them without any interruptions, really. I want to throw the watch away and just go.
So what you're doing really is that your attitude is to be as positive as you can be.
Yep.
And to take life and live it to the fullest that you possibly can. That's a brilliant attitude. But let's not fool ourselves, because this isn't easy to do, is it, Joe?
No, but eventually something's going to kill me. It's going to be the cancer. I told the oncologist this. I said, listen, because when she put me on maintenance, I said, is this going to go on for the rest of my life this way? And she said, well, probably not, only because the cancer will become resistant to what we're giving you. We'll have to try other therapies, other chemo combinations, genetic therapies. And I said, look, I'm not asking for a prediction from you. I know this is going to kill me at some point, or something else will. I said, if I had to worry about all those possibilities, I would not get out of bed in the morning. I wouldn't even get into bed. I'd be under the bed. And I don't choose to do that, because I will sacrifice the present. And this changed my outlook dramatically on life. It's not that, and it's not easy. There are days, obviously. The worst time is when I'm alone. But what I do for a living and my family, you put those two in combination, and I don't have time to think about really bad things.
You don't have time to be miserable.
No,
you don't have time. Can I just, I'm going to just turn it around and come back to the bereavement part of it, because I know that there are so many people out there who have suffered tremendous loss. Now, you were married for 40 some years.
When she passed, it was 2016. We got married in 1973. So it was 40, let me do my math right, 42, 43, 44 years, something like that. I don't know.
But that's a long time to be married.
Yeah, 43.
It's a long time. You've got that person always there and always with you. Now, there are people who might say to you, well, I don't know why you should be sad or why you should grieve, because you had all of those 40 some years. But there are other people who get it, because you're not one person. You've always been two people, and now you've always been two people as one, and it must feel as if you've had a limb chopped off. Actually, worse than that.
Even worse. She was half my soul.
Right. So now there are people.
I'm missing that piece.
There are people out there who also are going through bereavement, some similar to you, some, but I always say no person's loss is worse, less or more than another person's loss.
Correct.
Because your pain is your pain. Whatever you're going through, that your pain is your pain. And, we should always, remember that about other people. You know, you can't say, well, they were only married for 10 years, so
Right.
they feel as much as you, and so on.
No.
But I think certainly in our Western world, there's such a we don't talk about death. Now, in our schools, you're in the school system, so you know this is a fact, right? More than most of us. But in our school systems, we talk about birth, we talk about prevent birth control, we talk about, you know, babies, we educate our children in the ways of procreation, we educate our children in the ways of, you know, preventing procreation.
Right.
But we, you know, we're educating them about babies, we're educating them about our bodies, we're educating them continually about, you know, these sorts of things, the reproductive system. So nobody's afraid to talk about it. It's in our schools, it's there for us. But there's no real education in our Western culture that deals with death and dying and what that means. And the fact that it happens to all of us, we're
Right.
all going there, some of us sooner rather than later, but we seem to be so loath to talk about the educating or to educate our children about death and dying. And of course, what I do, I see the effects of this lack of knowledge. What do? When we lose someone, no matter who it is, and of course the more connected we are, the worse it is, but when we lose someone, the emptiness, the void, the loss, the pain, all that, and we have not had one jot of education
Right.
that will teach us or help us to deal with our grief and our bereaved state. I know that when Al first came to me to talk to me about you, do you remember this, Al? You said, I've got a friend. That was as much as you told me. I've got a friend who's lost his wife and I really want him to see you. And we tried for a while and
Yeah, scheduled.
nothing worked out. And then at one point, I actually did come to Long Island. I stayed with Al, in fact, and his family, and that's when I met you. I mean, when and just for the record, Joe had a consultation with me, right, Joe? I mean,
Yes.
we sat and I managed to connect with your wife and so on and so forth. I don't know actually what your beliefs were prior to that. I know that you were probably hopeful. Can you remember, Al, anything that he might have said to you prior to this? Was he gung ho to do it? Was he nervous about it? Did he have reservations? What was going on with
I,
him then?
you know, I think he could answer it better than me. But you didn't, you rarely have expectations. You just go into things and have
Yeah.
an open mind and open heart, and I think you were hopeful, correct?
Yes, very much so. No reservations about it. I've always believed that this.
But did you ever before then, did you ever do anything about this? Did you ever, was
No.
it? No. So this was your first
Right.
time.
Actually, Al began to talk with me, and he connected with Jackie.
Right.
And said
Now,
some things to me that he could not have known,
I
and
have
you said some things you could not have known.
I have two questions for you then, for this show. I have lots of questions for you, but I have two for the show.
Okay.
And the first is, do you think, I think I know the answer, but for everyone watching here, do you think, because you've talked, but we've heard about how positive you are, how much your family are involved, how much your work means to you. We've obviously seen this tremendously positive attitude, which I'm hoping will inspire all of those people out there listening, and especially those who are bereaved, who are suffering with grief, and some can handle it better than others. Do you think, first of all, are you still grieving? That's the first question. And the second question would be, what would your advice, if someone suffered a loss, and there are many painful losses? I always think that the worst kind of a loss which I've not experienced, thank God, must be the loss of a child. I know it is, because I've dealt with people who have lost their children. So,
Mhm.
but as I've said before, a person's pain is a person's
Right.
pain.
It's not.
And
It's not a
you
competition.
know, I mean, there are people who seriously grieve for their animals.
Yeah.
And there are people out there saying, what on earth is that? They're crazy. But I can see that you love
Absolutely.
this creature.
Becomes a part of the family.
Grief is grief, right?
Yes.
So the first question is, do you still grieve? And I suppose attached to that question is, do you need any help from us with that, or are you doing fine? And then the second question would be, Joe, you know, what would you have to say to people who are suffering a bereavement? How would you hope to inspire them? What would be, you know, the three things that you would tell them to do if they were still in grief? So let's deal with, are you in grief? Let's deal with that one
On
first.
some level, yes, because I miss the pleasure of our company. So when I have, we sit and have a cup of coffee, or you see a beautiful sunset, that would be the person I would turn to. So I miss that. But what has mitigated that is I talk to her when that's happening. When I'm having a cup of coffee, I talk with her. I tell her what I'm doing for the day. I'll say, I need some, watch out for me today. I got a tough meeting or something else. And I was driving home the other night from a late meeting, and I would normally give her a call when I left the office to say, want me to stop and get a cup of coffee? You want a muffin or something? And she would say, oh, yes, Joseph. And I will say that to her, and I'll answer for her. Oh, yes, Joseph.
In the car now.
In the car. Absolutely.
Hey,
And I don't stop and get her a muffin and coffee.
Do you buy the muffin?
No, I got to keep away from those now.
Doc, before you continue, I just wanted to bring up with you yesterday, through all this stuff that you've gone through, right? And it's in relation to your question too, Rosemary. You've gone through, Jackie's passing, which you have grieved about, you're grieving about. Then you had cancer. Then you had a hip replacement,
carpal tunnel surgery, both ends. Now I have cataracts.
So
I'm starting to take this personally.
Will you stop?
I'm starting to take this personally.
But through all of that, like you're going through, a situation where you have stage 4 cancer and all these other things. You told me when I spoke to you actually yesterday that still the most paramount thing on your mind is the grief, and just to highlight how powerful grief can
it's huge, because everything and look it. Don't get the idea this was a perfect marriage and we were all sweetness and light. We went through everything together.
Look, I know for a fact your wife is tough.
Oh, yeah, she is. I needed supervision though. So.
Yeah, you had to do as you were told.
Absolutely. And so when you're now trying to do this, navigate this thing without the North Star, it's difficult.
Yeah.
You lose your way sometimes, or you think you've lost your way. What got me out of it, when my grandfather passed away, my grandmother and grandfather were very, very close. And I said to my grandmother, what are we going to do? And my grandfather raised me with it, and my grandparents did it. She said, we're going to laugh a little bit, we're going to cry a little bit, and we're going to get on with it. And that's really it. Sometimes you laugh, and you laugh hard. And now we've at the point, because even with the children, with my sons as well, we laugh about the times we had with Jackie. They laugh about the times, and they know things I don't know because I wasn't home a lot. I was working, so their interactions with her were theirs. And so my plan is, one of the things I'm going to do when I retire is write a book about my family from my perspective, and they're going to write their chapters in it, so that we can pass that along to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren.
Good idea.
Comes afterwards. But so you learn to laugh again, and that takes a while. You learn to laugh at holiday times, because somebody said, August 12th, that must be a terrible day. Well, in a sense, every day is a terrible day, but in a sense, it's not. I know she told me she's all right. And one of the other times that she did come to me clearly, I said, this is where you live. And she said, yes. And there were all flowers around her, and it looked beautiful. And I said, are you okay? She said, I'm okay. Don't be sad. And I said, okay. And I take her at her word because I know her a long time, you know. So I would suggest that advice from my grandmother is exactly what happened. You laugh sometimes, you cry sometimes, and the crying gets less, because you realize, and again, that sense of hopelessness, or you know, being completely without direction, recedes because I know I'm going to see her. So it's not that I'm anxious to get there immediately, because I want to finish up some things with my children and grandchildren. But if I were to go tomorrow, I have no regrets.
What would you, if you could choose three things that people can actually put into place themselves,
Okay.
like 3 tasks that they could do, or 3 actions that they can take to help with their bereavement, to help with their grief? Can you, sort of
I think I can. I
one,
think I
2,
can.
and 3?
Uh,
What?
First thing is, don't run away from her or him. Embrace them. I did it, and I didn't have a plan when I did it, but I have pictures all over my office at home, because my son was very generous to give me a lot of space, of her, and she's smiling in all of them because that's the way I see her. And so now my granddaughter, who was, I don't know, 3-4 months old when she passed, she picks them up and kisses them and says, "Grandma Jackie, she's in heaven." And nobody told her to say that, you know, and she's happy. Her middle name is Jacqueline as well. But so don't run away from her.
So the first thing you would say is don't run away.
No,
Meaning embrace
embrace her. Embrace that person.
embrace that person, bring them into your life, put up
Keep
the
them-
photographs.
That's the way you keep them alive.
Right.
And tell story. And then the second thing is talk about them. They're still there.
Talk about them to who? To
your
to anybody,
grandchildren,
everybody.
to anybody, you know.
But to your family and to your friends.
At first, I couldn't get a sentence out without crying, and that's disappeared. Not because I don't miss her, I do. But at the same time, I'm not going to spend this time with a perpetual wake. The wake is an invention of the funeral industry, and it allows people.
Would you say that this is what I'm hearing from you, and this is what I would certainly tell my clients when they come to me, because people come to me because, like you came to me, because they need that, hopefully that understanding, that knowledge that that person is there.
Yeah.
You said a minute ago that when you talked about her at first, it was really hard. You couldn't barely talk about her without crying.
Right.
But what I say to people, and I think what I'm hearing you say, is it doesn't matter if you cry, get it out anyway.
Right. Don't run.
Is that what you're saying? Don't let the emotion silence you.
The impulse would be to stop crying. You don't cry.
Especially men, right?
Well, that's baloney. But
it's taught, right, Doc?
Staunch women. We have staunch women who also feel. People feel that if they cry, then their family then they're going to upset their family.
Yeah.
Well, you got to pick. At first, you got to pick and choose your moments.
Right.
I didn't want to upset my sons, the grandchildren, but at the same time, I had to cry.
Well, I think I've always encouraged people to cry, even if you have someone in the hospital and you know that they're dying, and there are people who think, well, we're not going to talk, we're not going to tell them that they're dying. So the patient is pretending because he or she already knows they're dying.
Right.
So they're pretending for your sake, and you're pretending for their sake. And what you're missing out on is that those last few days or weeks or months where you can open your heart to each other. But I think it's, and I'd like your opinion on this, Joe, because I know this is true of my clients. I say to people, when you cry in front of your family, you actually give them permission to
Permission.
cry.
Absolutely.
You say to them, it's okay to cry.
You said that to me, Rosemary, and it was it couldn't be more true. But
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
at first,
you open up your heart and you give them permission, because if you're not careful, if you're not expressing your grief, as you just said, talk to your family, that if you don't do that, everybody's walking on eggshells. Nobody
you
wants
have to.
to upset anybody else, and so on.
It's not
So,
upsetting.
so I think that's absolutely brilliant advice that you're giving there. What would the third thing be?
Well, when you celebrate, there were no strings. We can't talk about certain things. We won't do so. You celebrate. They're there with you.
Yeah.
And we at first, when I would, we would see each other, my sons and I, and we would start talking. We would start crying. We'd hug each other and move on. And now it's been replaced by, hey, remember when Mom said that? Remember when that happened? And then we laugh hard till we cry about her. So you're
treating her, which is wonderful for her. You're treating her as if she is still a part of the family.
Absolutely.
You're involving her in the family, as are your children and your grandchildren,
Yep.
which is just, well, it's wonderful for Jackie, because she's not having to tap me on the shoulder to say, you need to talk to Joe and remind her, because
No.
she would if you weren't doing it right.
I know.
But you're celebrating.
Absolutely.
The entire family celebrating her life and your lives together.
And it's okay to revise history, because when you remember, I think we do it anyway, just with many things, is you minimize the bad times and you highlight the good times come to the surface more, which is what you want, because that was her best self, and you remember her best self.
Yeah.
And
we all have a best self.
I know. I hope I'm treated by my children the same way. I've given them a lot of material to go the other way, but I think that by doing it, there is no more. When I go to sleep at night, I talk to her before I go to sleep. I say my prayers. Thanks for the day. I had a wonderful day. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And I talk to her. And the other night, I felt a pang in my back. And I said, are you here? And I said, I think I'm answering my own question. I said, well, I'm glad you're here. So it's not, how could I be afraid of her presence? It would be impossible. So I think if we have choices. I didn't have a choice of her leaving. I have a choice of how I respond to her leaving.
You sound like me, Joe.
Well, I wish.
What you're saying is, I think also, which is very important for this show, we have a choice of attitude.
Yes.
And we can take the high road, the positive road. We can celebrate. And if I can sort of recap on the three answers to the questions, the question I asked, what would you say to people? Don't be afraid to cry.
No.
Because, as I always say, crying gives your family permission to cry.
Yep.
And if you're all crying together, weirdly, it doesn't make it worse. Weirdly, you just gather together and you're comforting each other.
Yes.
The second thing I think you said was, embrace, don't run away from it. Sort of include her, put photos up, talk to your family about her. Don't pretend that this person didn't exist except in your heart. Don't go and lock yourself in a bedroom by yourself and cry. Share it with everybody. And I think the third thing you said was to talk about it, right? To
celebrate, right?
Celebrate and to celebrate the fact that that she was here with you, also, one thing, but also that you all had each other for those, that wonderful time that you had together.
Yeah. The other thing too, Rosemary, is that each of my sons had a different relationship with her, and mine was different. So I can't impose my grief on them. And I have to understand when I'm not feeling that anymore and they still are.
Yeah.
You know, and some of them are better at expressing that than others. You know, my oldest son is much more closed in.
Keep it inside.
All right, but he redid the garage, Al. He cleaned it all out, put up shelves, did all kinds of stuff. He used to move cabinets around, but there's a whole wall in there of Jackie stuff. One of her hats, some other things, and that's the way he is.
That's the way he expresses his love.
But it made me feel wonderful to walk in there. I said, "Hey, that's all Mom." He said, "Of course it is." And I said,
Nice.
So, everybody will get to a place that they can be and be comfortable with it, and don't rush it, because, you start feeling good, or you feel better, and another person like my son is not there yet, doesn't want to talk about it. Don't force them to. But I got to tell you, what helped him was just what you're saying, that we could cry together, that we could, and reassure, if you have children, especially, and you've lost somebody that's connected to the children, like a wife or a husband, let them know how much that person loved them. Because
Do you think that having a consultation with me helped in any way?
it did, because, at first you think you're just imagining things, but, Al encouraged me to write down everything and anything that happened. And that's the other thing. And that's something that came out of meeting with you, as well, as just be open to the signs. They're going to be there. And at first you're not, because you say, I just imagine that. But when you write it down, you go back and read it. And because otherwise memory would say, that never happened.
Right.
When it's fresh and you write it down and you see your words and you feel your words, you remember. And say, no, this wasn't just making it up. Like one of my sons drives a truck for UPS. And he said, Pop, I was driving the other day, and there was it was kind of a rundown section of a neighborhood, and there was just rubble in this one big field. And right in the middle of the rubble was a sunflower sticking, and that was her favorite. And I knew who it was.
So you're saying, encourage people to look for those signs,
Absolutely.
look for those signs yourself. I wish we had more time, because, it's fascinating listening to you, fascinating hearing your story.
But after I met with you, after I met with you and the things that you spoke to me about Jackie, and you would have no knowledge of a number of things that you said regarding what she was saying about two of our sons, or right then and there. It just kind of gives you confidence that you're not crazy, that you're not just delusional, that you are experiencing these things. And
so would you advise people to contact someone like me?
Yes.
But
Absolutely.
To be cautious about it, because
definitely, because I'm sure there were a lot of charlatans that, and every profession.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you that I felt a great sense of peace and relief after I talked with you. It was not unsettling at all. It made me feel very good to know that you, and then the way you were describing what she was saying and interrupting you while you were talking to me was exactly her. That was Jackie. That was nobody else, and that made me feel wonderful. One of the things, my goal in coming to see you, when Al asked me, you asked me, what do you hope to get out of this? And I said, I'd like to learn more how I can be more attuned to this, because I'd like to experience it more, obviously. I've always believed it. Now it's much more like I know it. I know that there's things after this. I mean, since the beginning of recorded time, human beings have said there's something after this. I don't think they're all delusional or all on drugs or whatever. And
people think I am,
Well,
not everybody, thank goodness.
I don't.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, I don't. But I think that helped tremendously in terms of, and when I'm home, my kids were all, what happened? And so I told them, and I said, these are the things. And they said, boy, that's wonderful. And even my oldest guy, I don't really buy that stuff, but I'm glad you're happy about it. I said, good. And it's not a matter of debating. Everybody doesn't have to feel what I feel when I'm feeling it. And once you kind of let go of some of those things, let it happen. What I've learned with things that have happened since is, again, I read a book about 5-10 years ago by Albert Ellis, and the title is How to Stubbornly Refuse to Make Yourself Miserable About Anything. It's a
I
great
like
book.
that. I
Yeah,
have
it's
to
a
get
great
that
book, and I've read it several times. I've given copies to friends of mine who were in a rut, and he's right. Essentially, what he's saying is, you can't control the hand you're dealt. You can control how you play it, and you can control your response. That you can control.
And that's what this show is about. That's why we do
Yep.
this, right, Al? Because we try to encourage people, give people recipes for life. You know, there are actions that they can take, and the, you know, changing the way you think very often to be more positive about things. I actually wish there was much more education in our culture dealing with death, dying, what happens prior to, what happens after. I'm not talking about educating people to believe in what I believe in.
No, same. Yeah.
I'm talking about, you know, well, we're all going to die. So what's the process then? And what does a family do? And what does an individual person do when they're struggling with this grief and so on and so forth? Maybe one day the Western world will become more enlightened, and maybe one day there will be schools where we can actually not only learn about the birthing process, but we can also learn about the dying process as well. Al, I'm coming to you. Because I mean, you just inspire me, Joe, because you are, you know, I know there are people out there listening who will think, well, it's all right for him. He's got his children and he's got his family and so on and so forth.
Right.
I know it's easier for some people. You've said this already. You've said it, you know, but I really do think that people can be inspired by you. And everybody should buy that book you just mentioned.
It's a
Al.
great book. Albert Ellis was the man's name.
Okay.
Yeah,
Al? Yes.
Albert Ellis, and
Come
he
on
was
in here, Al.
so I just wanted to just let people know, you know, I was with you through a lot of that, Doc, and
right.
and I don't want anybody to think, because of his incredible attitude, that it was easy in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you cried in front of me. We cried together. My father passed away too. So just please, if I could emphasize how much grief you felt, and I just saw, I'm sure, little fractions of it, and felt little fractions of how you felt losing Jackie, but still, you made it through it, and you have this wonderful perspective and attitude about you know, everything going on in your life, and it is amazing, and for me, it always puts things in perspective that you can handle it with the right attitude, even if it's extremely challenging, which it was for you, Doc, right?
Yep.
Well, nobody on this show is ever going to say to our listeners out there that having a positive attitude is easy, because it isn't.
Right.
And I always say to you, Al, I always say to people, it's easy when it's easy. But when it's hard, we have to fight, we have to struggle, we have to keep our focus on what is important. And I think that the most important thing that we have, you know, we can't control what happens to us. You know that, Joe. We can't control the weather. We can't control, you know, what happens to us day to day. We think we can. But you know what they say, when we're planning what we're going to be doing next week, the gods are looking down at us and laughing. Because,
yeah, right.
because the future, you know, the future can turn like this, as you've experienced.
Yep.
So we don't have any control really in life, on day-to-day life, even though we try to have, but we don't. But what we can control, and what we can be in control of, and what we can determine very much so, is the attitude that we have to whatever life throws at us.
Yep.
Would you agree with that,
I
Joe?
agree.
2 minutes to end this.
Yep.
But what you got to say?
The last thing I would say, and it sustains me all the time, is that, you know, I believe, I know love is stronger than death. and death is just a. I read a book by C.S. Lewis on grieving, and he said in it, the dance continues with the beloved.
Yeah.
You just have to learn some new steps,
Oh, what a great
but the dance isn't over,
yeah.
and you have to just look at it differently, and I do, but she's still there, and that sustains me.
And we know that.
Yes,
And
that's not a belief.
and she's standing right next to you as we're doing.
I'm sure.
I've just been told to tell you that. I am
Okay,
not,
Jack.
I am not going to go against your wife because
No,
I know
no.
she's I'm not going to get on her bad side.
No,
I think that sort of to end this with that, love is bigger than, larger than, greater than death.
anything.
And it love can help us to survive all. And I think that for people who feel that they don't have anyone in their lives to love them, for instance, learn to love yourself.
Yes.
That's the most positive thing. I tell people, look in the mirror and say every day, you may not be the best person in the world, but I love you. You've got
Right.
to learn to love yourself. And once you start to learn to love yourself, you'll find people are drawn to you because your energy starts to change and it becomes more loving and more positive and so on. So 2 seconds, Al, for a final.
Just to thank you so much, and I'm glad, Doctor, you were able to share your
Thank
story.
you.
You're
Thank you for
inspiring
inviting
in everything you do, but I'm glad you could share your story for everyone out there.
Thank you for inviting me.
Did we have any comments or anybody?
Oh, I was so caught up. Let's see. We have. Thank you, love and big hug to all. Someone asked, "How can you be certain you'll see her again, Doc?"
How can I be certain the sun's going to come up tomorrow? It just seems like, it's a logical.
Yeah, great response. Paul says,
I do think the consult might have helped a little bit to confirm that.
Absolutely.
Paul says, a truly fantastic and inspiring discussion, and a lot of hearts and love being sent your way.
Great. All right. So if you need to contact us, info@everythingisattitude.com. I can't believe I just said that, Al. Right there, I've got it. I don't have to think about it anymore. So write to us at info@everythingisattitude.com if you want to participate in the show. If you want to be on camera, by all means, let us know. If you just have an issue but you'd rather not be on camera but you'd love us to talk about it, and we promise we won't. If you don't want to disclose who you are, we can do that. We can certainly keep your name. We'll keep you incognito, but if you've got an issue that you might like help and guidance with, if you want a recipe for life, info@everythingisattitude.com. Of course, you can email me, rosemary@rosemaryantaltea.com, if you need to know any more about this show. I would very much, very, very much like to say how much, Joe, I love you to pieces, and how much I appreciate you coming on the show. And I know there are going to be so many people out there who are going to be so inspired with you and so inspired with your story. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Al, for being there, my co-host, my partner, and all of that stuff. And did you want to say something else? I can see you. No, you're done. All right, because I'm done. We're moving forward and positively, with a positive attitude.
Absolutely.
We're going to take that positive attitude with us for the rest of the day, tomorrow, and through it, and so on, for as long as we can. So until we see you again next week, remember, we do have Thursday mornings, every morning, 11 o'clock Standard Eastern Time. You can find us on, it's Al Pisano, Facebook. I'm not going to give it out. I'm just letting people know you can find me on Facebook. You can find us just about everywhere, right, Al? We're all over the place. And so until we see you again next time, please, 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 please have a very, very, very blessed and positive day.